And the decision of one man to launch a wholly unjustified and brutal invasion of of Ukraine.
What's going on internationally? How do we get to the place where, Putin decides he's going to just invade Russia? Nothing like this has happened in World War II.
It is June 19th, 2025, and the White House is now saying that President Trump will decide within the next 2 weeks as to whether the U.S. is going to engage directly in strikes against Iran. Yes, that's even as the Pentagon has increased the U.S. military's presence in the Middle East this week, and even as we have reports saying that Trump has already made the decision, already approved the plan. He's just waiting to put it into place. How long could we be waiting? And what does all of this mean for the overall multipolar world? As you have countries like Russia and China condemning Israel's attack on Iran. But it also raises bigger questions about what Russia and China could do and will do if the U.S. engages in an even more direct and official war on Iran, and what some of those treaties that Russia and Iran say have put into place, what those could mean for Russian involvement or for the lack thereof. We got into all of the latest with a special guest earlier, so let's take a listen to that conversation now. Joining me now to discuss is international relations and security analyst Mark Sleboda. Mark, thanks so much for taking the time to join me.
Rachel, thanks for having me. It's always an honor and a pleasure to be on the show.
It's always good to have you. Now, I want to get your take on the latest here, and we'll get to some of the latest news involving Russia and Ukraine. But I want to start off with where the U.S. is right now. We've got the reports that the Pentagon has increased the U.S. military presence in the Middle East this week. Now you have reports that multiple U.S. State Department aircraft conducted evacuation flights from Baghdad. This, as the Wall Street Journal reported on Wednesday, that Trump told his top officials that he approved plans to attack Iran, but was holding off on giving the final order, trying to force Tehran to surrender. Iran's supreme leader has made it clear that's not going to happen. So how do you view the current situation, and how close could we be to direct U.S. strikes on Iran?
I think we are hours, possibly more like days away. I mean, that's where we are. Yes, Trump hasn't given the final order, but you don't put that many U.S. military assets on the move, right? All converging on the Middle East. We're talking about a total of 3 carrier groups, either in theater or in the broader area, at least 2, directly in theater. I've seen over 40 strato tankers that will be used. The U.S. already has some that have been refueling Israeli planes, fighter aircraft over the skies of Syria to keep the intensity of the airstrikes up thus far. But it's going to go up monumentally. And of course, it's going to involve U.S. and British aircraft at the very least, possibly even French. We're going to see a very large increase in the amount of air power that is going to be dropping missiles and bombs on Iranian territory. And then presumably Iran will retaliate by striking U.S. military bases throughout the Middle East. The Trump and his people have been going off, oh, it's fine, our defenses are great and everything. But we see already that the Iron Dome is simply not up to the task. We haven't even seen what I would consider proper saturation of the Iron Dome. And we already see the Wall Street Journal reporting that Israel is running out of interceptors, has less than 2 weeks of interceptors left at the current rate of expenditure. And by all accounts, Iran is either rationing out its missiles, and isn't hitting Israel at the moment with a very large salvos to spread it out further over time, following an attrition based strategy, or Israel has been fairly effective in taking out Iran's missile launchers and their missile inventory, their depots. We don't know which yet. We really don't know. I haven't seen any credible evidence one way or another. One side says one thing says the other. But it's clear we are in they are in a long-range strike war of attrition, right? Kind of a shadow of what has been going on in Ukraine. But what we see is that both sides' air defense is faltering already. The offensive capability on both sides is penetrating through. Iranian missiles are getting through more than they are being intercepted from everything that I have seen. And a literal rocket scientist, Ted Polstall, talking on Daniel Davis this week, has confirmed that. Right, that from everything that he can see right now, that more Iranian missiles are getting through than are being intercepted, and they haven't run out of interceptors yet. At the same time, we saw in the initial hours and days of this conflict that Iranian air defense was out for the count. Certainly for the first few hours was fairly ineffective. There are reports that there was a combination of cyber attacks as well as drone attacks from within Iran by Mossad operatives that set up drone bases, drone manufacturing facilities, everything, an incredible amount of Mossad penetration. There was even spike anti-tank guided missiles that were set up to operate remotely so they could be controlled theoretically from back in Israel, that were also capable of firing on anti-aircraft installations, but as well on all types of other military movement and facilities. And that very much assisted Israel in the opening hours of the campaign. What we don't know is how much damage they were really able to do. Iranian air defense seems to have become somewhat more effective since then. Claims of Israel to having total control, air superiority over Tehran, and I find that all very questionable. And I think most of their accusations that their planes are flying over Iranian territory are actually more drones, which are disposable, rather than actual aircraft. I think most Iranian aircraft are still firing out of Iraqi airspace at their targets. But they're flying F-35s and F-16s, both of which require extensive, very large maintenance hours for each hour of operation. These aircraft are already being pushed to their limits. They are desperate. They've got to be desperate at this point for the U.S. to come in and take some of that pressure off, because the Israeli Air Force is operating at the edge, and they cannot keep up the tempo of strikes that they've been doing without some type of relief from the United States, from a larger force. So everything that tells me that probably sometime this weekend, at the latest early next week, we are going to see the U.S. And the United Kingdom, to a lesser extent, possibly France, step into this conflict in a big way. The nominal reason for the U.S. intervention is specifically to go after the Fordo nuclear facilities, which are buried deep in a mountain, very deep. And what the only munition that has the possibility of penetrating that far is the US's GBU-57 massive ordnance penetrator bomb. It's a 30,000-pound bomb. That is the only thing that has a chance. And to be perfectly honest, it will probably require multiple direct hits to even have a chance of penetrating that far. Because, of course, the Iranians, they're not building their facilities straight down, right? I mean, they're going to be spread and leveled out, and they're going to have all type of different materials constructing, the layers of earth and concrete and reinforced steel and everything that will be protecting these facilities. But the Israelis can't use these bombs, right? You need a B-2. That's the only U.S. plane that can carry them. I mean, they're 30,000 pounds. And that's what's going to be dropping. But that's just the beginning, really. I mean, ultimately, the idea of this is all being launched to stop Iran from having nuclear weapons. I mean, Tulsi Gabbard is speaking for the collection of U.S. intelligence agencies, told us just back in March that Iran does not have a nuclear weapons program. They haven't since the early 2000s. And the International Atomic Energy Agency, after muddying the waters for a few days, once again came out and said they have no evidence that Iran has a nuclear weapons program. So then the question becomes nuclear enrichment, right? Which Iran is entitled to do by international law and as a signatory to the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty. But none of this matters to Trump. I don't care what Tulsi Gabbard, his own director of national intelligence, said. He's bought into this, right? Through some combination of Netanyahu and the neocons whispering in his ear and his own pro-Zionist predilections, he's obviously ready to jump into this headfirst, as it were. Right now there's so many questions we don't know. How many missiles capable of hitting Israel does Iran have left? We don't know. Exactly how many interceptors does Israel have left? We don't know. I'm more actually worried rather than airstrikes on Iran. Airstrikes they're going to do lots of damage, but they're not going to regime change Iran. And that's what all of the Western media has already skipped past the red herring, the pretext of nuclear enrichment, and they're all talking regime change. I mean, Politico, the Washington Post, you name it, they're all. And the thing is, they don't care. They think it's great. I mean, it's like they're salivating, right? They're biting, at the bit. They've been waiting for this for years. They're revealing themselves as the fourth state of U.S.-led Western global hegemony, and they are largely cheerleading on not just attacking Iran, but regime change. But what we do know that Mossad and to a lesser extent CIA and MI6 have had enormous penetration of Iranian society. We've seen assassinations of their top military, their top scientists, even their top diplomats that were negotiating with the United States, and Trump, like some type of mad ghoul going off. They're all dead now. They didn't agree to what I demanded, and they're all dead, and screaming capital. He's an absolutely forget madman theory. He is a bloodthirsty lunatic. Right? A dangerous, bloodthirsty lunatic with the intellectual and emotional maturity of a 13-year-old boy is in charge of the U.S. military and about to launch a full-scale war on Iran at this point. But ultimately, my biggest fear is the covert operations on the ground, because that is where regime change will come from. Now, they've all these assassinations, all the terror and sabotage campaign, everything, the drone campaign from within, reminiscent of Operation Spiderweb and more, all of that doesn't amount to regime change, though. So what I'm looking for is evidence of groups like the Mujahideen Khalq, the MEK, this terrorist organization, formerly listed by the U.S. as a terrorist organization for killing Americans, no doubt. They've been chilling for at least the last decade in Albania. They're I'm sure they're going to be let off the leash. Baluchi separatists that are supported by both Israel and the CIA. These are the type of covert groups that will be used as proxies on the ground that will try to beat the regime change. All of the airstrikes, whether Israeli or US and beyond, will simply be to create the political and social crisis where those forces then theoretically have an opportunity to topple the Iranian government. I haven't seen that yet, but that is doubtless the play. So I'm looking for how strong the Iranian government is, how much the Iranian people are having a rally around the flag effect or the opposite. Right now, it appears to be very much, from the outside at least, a rally around the flag effect. There was an incident where the Israel has bombed the Iranian main news agency as they were on the air, and the main female anchor refused to leave until the bombs were literally falling, and then resumed broadcasting just a few hours later, and has become kind of a moral raising, rallying figure for the Iranian government and many sympathetic around the world. But the axis of resistance has been mauled in the last year and a half, and they are not coming to Israel's defense, Iran's defense, in any big way. Not that I've seen thus far. Hezbollah, their leadership was mauled. They were forced into a ceasefire. Hamas is still fighting for their existence. The Houthis are still kicking and lobbing an occasional missile, but they've endured months of U.S. and Israeli bombing now on their capabilities. So Israel and Syria is gone. Al-Qaeda rules Syria now. So Iran is more isolated from what had been their Shiite allies throughout the region than they ever have been before. We see, I believe, a methodical building up to this, taking out, or at least badly damaging, one of Iran's proxies, their regional allies after another leading up to this. But again, all of the airstrikes in the world are not going to change the Iranian government. That's going to have to be led on the ground. And that is what I'm watching for with the most careful eye. And we know it is a joint war because Trump keeps talking about we have control of Iran's skies. We, right? Everything is we. So obviously, even if U.S. forces haven't actually been dropping the bombs yet, they've been orchestrating and facilitating and providing, refueling and satellite intelligence and everything else. And now the U.S. looks like it's going to have to go in and finish the job, because whatever Trump was told or believed, Israel is not strong enough to do what they started. That's going to require the U.S., if the U.S. can do it. Again, there's just too many variables to make a prediction. Obviously, they can do immense damage to Iran, to the Iranian people, to Iranian infrastructure, cities, etc. But at the end of the day, the Iranian government's main goal is just survival. If they survive, they win. And that is because of the power imbalance and the war of aggression launched on them, where now already I think it will be seen as a loss for the U.S. and for Israel if they don't achieve regime change.
Yeah, and especially when, exactly as you were noting there, if it would be a different world if we hadn't seen the assassination of Nasrallah, the head of Hezbollah, or the overthrow of Bashar al-Assad. And it's also interesting to look at the ways in which, hey, Syria held that for many years, right? It looked like from the outside, okay, things are somewhat a version of stable, and then all of a sudden it crumbles. And now the U.S. is looking at Iran going, hey, we know the blueprint, we know what to do here. And I'm also curious too, when it comes to, kind of Russia and China watching this because they know that, hey, the US may be targeting Iran now. They're certainly targeting Russia now. They want to target China. Well, you had the Kremlin coming out earlier saying that Russian President Putin and Chinese President Xi Jinping held a phone call on Thursday during which both leaders condemned Israel for its strikes on Iran and agreed de-escalation was needed. We also heard from Russian Foreign Ministry spokeswoman Maria Zakharova on Wednesday, and she questioned, quote, "What has Iran done wrong? What is it being bombed for?" She also noted that Israel has no right to push for regime change. So how do you view the position that Russia and China are kind of in right now, trying to keep this growing multipolar world still growing and stable, while at the same time still having to deal with US antics targeting a country like Iran, which is an important pillar of the multipolar world?
Okay, so, well, first of all, forgive my realpolitik head from layering up, but the right, might makes right. I mean, we're in the world of an anarchic world of international states, with international law being a mutually agreed upon figment when it's convenient and ignored when it's not. Does Russia have a right to regime change a U.S. proxy regime in Ukraine? Well, they would say no. Russia would say yes, and vice versa. So at the end of the day, it's might that will decide what is right or not. Unfortunately, that's the world of international relations that we live in. You're exactly right about Syria. If the Syrian government was still standing, this attack could not take place, because all of those Israeli and now U.S. aircraft would have to fly through Syrian skies with Russian-provided air defense, which would be far more formidable. So removing the Syrian government was opening the gates to war, a war of long-range strikes on Iran. Right now, I mean, on a political level, both Russia and China are, in lockstep and condemning this and siding with Iran. On the other hand, we've found out some rather useful things from the Russian government. One is that they've already made a deal with Israel to protect Russian workers at the Bushehr nuclear power plants, where Russia has some 200 Rosatom engineers, scientists, and workers that were building a second plant at Bushehr for the Iranians. And supposedly Israel has already guaranteed their safety. Russia does have to look after its own people first. Secondly, Putin revealed that the strategic partnership that was recently agreed upon with Iran, and actually just ratified by the Iranian parliament only on Monday, has no defense clauses. It's all economics, politics, other things. But there had long been the assumption by Russian military analysts, everyone I've talked to, the Western media, myself included, that Russia would be building Iran a air defense and electronic warfare, multi-layered, interconnected. No. In fact, Iran evidently wanted a remove from what they called bloc thinking. They didn't want any military agreement or assistance from Russia. Russia even proposed a stronger relationship between Russia, China, and Iran altogether, and evidently Iran balked at that. So Iran at the moment does not have the guarantee of Russian air defense in any capacity jumping to their safety. And I can't help but regard that as a fatal conceit. Part of it was because they hoped, evidently, that they could improve relations with the West. They naively, whatever you want to call it, and how much of that was Pezeshkian, whom as a reformist ticket ran on that as part of his campaign. What are decisions by the supreme leader and the other institutions of the Iranian government? I don't know. But this was kind of shocking to me. So Russia, they have very little guaranteed support from Russia in this, right? On an actual military or military technical level. It does look like China is stepping up to the plate a bit more. We've seen cargo planes flying from Chinese airspace into Iran, at least a couple of them in the past 2 or 3 days, turning their transponders off. They were likely carrying military equipment, missiles, perhaps anti-ship missiles, anti-air missiles. We don't know exactly, but likely carrying something of the sort, although not necessarily. And we do know that 2 Chinese reconnaissance ships, vessels, have now entered the waters off of Iran, the Persian Gulf. And doubtless they will be providing information on U.S. ships and the aircraft to the Iranians. And China, if anything, I think in demanding that this all stop, has taken the lead. And that makes certain extent. Russia is still taking on most of NATO, even if the U.S. has taken half a step back in the proxy conflict in Ukraine. And if a Russia and Chinese friendly Iranian government is to be preserved, particularly if as we assume the U.S. gets directly involved, then other countries like China and perhaps even Pakistan, although that might complicate things beyond the whole reasonable measure. Maybe it would be better if Pakistan just stayed out of it. But China is going to probably providing some level of support. And Russia will probably be providing at least satellite intelligence and that. But Putin made clear the Iranians haven't asked and they haven't agreed to any agreements that would give them more direct military technical assistance from Iran, which makes me a little more nervous for Iran in this particular aspect. So we do know that Russia has already, as part of deals, transferred a number, we don't know how many, of Su-35, Russia's 5th gen fighter aircraft, to Iran. And they have not entered the fray. They have not been hit. Israel would be crowing if they had managed to hit them. We don't know how many they have, how integrated they are, into Iran's military at this point. But that's interesting, at least, that we haven't heard anything about them so far. But yes, I do not think that we're ever going to see Chinese or Russian troops defending Tehran or anything of the sort, but that's not even practical. And what they can do, even asymmetrically, will be very interesting. And it has to be said, as this whole conflict goes on and the price of oil and the price of gas skyrocket, Russia's war coffers are flowing over. So even by launching this, the U.S. is strengthening Russia more in the conflict in Ukraine, both in terms of revenue coming into the state, but also in terms of the Kiev regime is already whining how they're not getting any military support, even any attention, political attention from the U.S. At this point. So U.S. can't do everything anymore. That's become painfully obvious. Can they even provide the air defense to protect Israel and their own military bases under Iranian long-range strikes? Doesn't look like it. So this is all in the offense. This is like, right now, it's like 2 midweight boxers pounding away at each other until one of them drops. And suddenly the U.S. is going to jump in and tag team into this as well. But if the goal is regime change, that raises the bar. And again, all Iran has to do to win victory is to survive.
Yeah, it's interesting to see. And I, as you were describing kind of what we've heard about Iran and this, deal with Russia, I'm going, the fatal mistake is always trying to be friends with the West or trying to do what the US wants. We've seen this so many times, and yet here we are once again. It's like, and I know that that's been a major concern with the latest Iranian president, right? He's coming in and it's like, hey, I completely understand. He wants to make a deal with the US. He wants the sanctions to be lifted. He's got to pay attention to the fact that Washington is filled with all of these neocons who have been, lusting for regime change in Iran for years now. And here we are,
Decades.
Yeah, exactly. Continuing on. Now, before we go, I do want to ask you about the latest when it comes to the ongoing war in Ukraine, because obviously we're seeing night after night of drone attacks coming from Russia. Russia is not letting up there. We also saw Zelensky leave the G7 meeting this week without a meeting with Trump and without any kind of U.S. aid like he may have gotten from Mr. Biden. So will you take us through kind of the latest there and what we need to be keeping an eye on, as all of the headlines have predictably been about Israel-Iran this week?
Yeah, all the attention is shifted, but Russia has taken advantage of this to, if anything, increase the tempo of operations. Very quietly, the Washington Post acknowledged that Russia is now taking 15 to 20 square kilometers a day right now, and that's, I would say, on the low end estimate. I mean, that might be lowballing it quite a bit. Russian advances in the Sumy region, what appears to be a crumbling of the Kiev regime's defenses in the Pokrovsk-Konstantinovka arc in the Donbass, but also in the northern Donbass. Russia has made great strides towards Seversk, and the Kiev regime may be forced to either fight to the death without supplies or withdraw from Seversk in the near future. Russia is plowing ahead. It's not taking headlines away because, even if 24 settlements a week that you've never heard of before are falling into Russian hands, they're still small towns and villages for the most part, but it's all happening faster. The Kiev regime, the capital, Kiev, the air defense is effectively non-existent. Russia launched some 440 drones last night, along with 30 missiles. So while the air war is going on between Israel and Iran, duking it out, Russia is pummeling Kiev night after night. Kiev is launching its own drones, but to much less effect. And part of that is that Russia has a much more effective air defense system than either Israel does, or Iran does, or Kiev does. And that makes all the difference in the world. And they have a seemingly high enough production for a supply of interceptors and this multi-layered short-range, medium-range, intermediate, long-range air defense and electronic warfare that is doing them very well. So everyone is taking their eye off what's going on in Ukraine, and Russia's just happy with that because they're making a lot of progress on the ground. And meanwhile, Zelensky's being stood up by Trump, and all of the foreplay from the Europeans and the world is simply not going to make up for that, for that full embrace of Trump, which is what Zelensky really needs. And I saw the perfect Russian meme over the weekend of a jilted Zelensky watching Trump run off to Netanyahu, and "Thou shalt not mistake the mistress for the wife."
It's interesting to see as that attention is taken away, right? And I know Zelensky, we've seen this time and time again since the October 7th attacks. He's like, how do I get back in the headlines? How do I get relevant again? And he still hasn't.
He's got to pull something. Got to pull some dirty watch for some dirty trick this weekend just to get attention.
Yeah, the concerns about false flag attacks, whether it's, Israel, Ukraine, it's everybody seems to want the U.S. attention, the United States attention, and that is very, very concerning all around. But I always appreciate you taking the time to join me to break down all of the latest here. International relations and security analyst Mark Sleboda, thanks so much for your time and insight.
Thanks for having me.
If anything in this video resonated with you, be sure to like it, share it with your friends, leave a comment. And as always, don't forget to subscribe. And if you want to keep up with all of my work, make sure that you're subscribed to my page on Substack. That's rachelblevins.substack.com. That's where you'll find ad-free videos and new weekly episodes of my exclusive series for paid subscribers called Sanction. You can also check out Sanction over on my page on Patreon. That's patreon.com/Rachel Blevins. As always, thank you all so much for all of your support, and I'll see you next time.